Today's 401k lawsuits are larger and more frequent than ever, but fiduciaries are advised to spend time on issues for which they don't get sued. Let's match your efforts to the danger. In this video, who can sue a 401k fiduciary and who actually does, the permitted grounds to sue and the ones really used, and the lessons to be learned from a real lawsuit. Maybe you've placed a bet at a casino, a charitable event, or bought a lottery ticket. You decide how much to bet. But in a 401k lawsuit, you risk your life savings, job, and career on a bet you didn't even make. Let's find out what's going on. ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, is the law creating and governing 401ks. Passed in 1974, it named just two parties that could sue. One was the Department of Labor, because it was assigned regulatory and enforcement authority, and the other was the retirement plan itself. This was because at that time, most retirement plans were pensions. Pensions have a common investment pool for all of the plan participants. A problem with the plan affects everybody in the plan, and the plan can sue on behalf of everybody. Nobody knew 401ks would have such an impact on retirement plans, and for the first 20 years, lawsuits were a rarity. Then the first 401k class action was granted, making it the third way to sue. 10 years later, in 2008, the Supreme Court ruled that an individual 401k plan participant could also sue, the fourth party that can sue. The odds of a lawsuit brought by the Department of Labor, the plan, or class action is one chance per retirement plan. But 401ks with individual plan participants allowed to sue makes their risk much greater. And settling with one person doesn't prevent another person from suing. In addition, the two most common lawsuits, class actions and individual suits, are almost exclusively for 401ks. You guys are personally liable to an extent way beyond employees of a company and way beyond fiduciaries for any other type of retirement plan. So let's just notice that. Just the numbers. Your increased risk has not gone unnoticed by the plan service provider industry. Their contracts deny any fiduciary entanglement. After all, who would want to take this risk, right? And some practice deceptive sales practices, ranging on one hand scare tactics and on the other blasé, don't worry about it advice. None of that helps you. Okay, four parties that can sue. Now let's ask on what grounds. The only grounds allowed for a fiduciary lawsuit are for violating fiduciary duty. There are 5 duties. Number 1, obey the rules and regulations. Number 2, diversify the investments. Number 3, pay no more than reasonable fees. Number 4, avoid conflicts of interest. And number 5, act prudently, which means to be safe rather than sorry. So there we have it. 4 parties can sue on 5 different grounds, creating 20 possible lawsuits. Now let's narrow down our focus so you don't waste time and energy on lawsuits which are unlikely. First, cross off the plan suing. Because 401ks usually have individual investment accounts and not a common investment pool, the odds of the plan suing a 401k fiduciary on behalf of all the plan participants is remote. Next, cross off failure to diversify the investments. I sold plans for years. I've never seen a plan with too few investment options, and neither have you. So just cross it off. What about failure to obey the rules and regulations? Well, obviously the Department of Labor sues for that. It's their bread and butter. But do plaintiff lawyers also sue over rules and regulations? Usually no. Breaking rules and regulations triggers fines and penalties, and not necessarily damages to plan participants. Because fines and penalties go to the Department of Labor, and if plaintiff lawyers can't get any of that money, they won't sue over rules and regulations. So the only one likely to sue over failure to obey the rules and regulations is the Department of Labor. Now, what about paying too much in fees, allowing conflict of interest, and failure to be prudent? Well, these issues are judgment calls calling for comparisons and begging for argumentation. The Department of Labor can sue over these issues, but because it doesn't want to be seen as favoring one type of service provider over another, they really don't like getting into it. And they also prefer slam dunk, not arguing. So it avoids judgment call lawsuits. But unreasonable fees, allowing conflicts of interest, and failure to be prudent do affect plan participants, so it's a perfect lawsuit for plaintiff attorneys, representing either individuals, which can blossom into something bigger, or class actions. It's where the big damage awards are that make the news. So, very quickly, we've just identified the areas you need to focus on for your defense. The Department of Labor's issues are compliance. You either complied or you didn't, If it were a light switch, it would be an on-off toggle switch. Plaintiff lawyers sue in civil court over fees, conflicts of interest, and prudence. They're bread and butter. Those issues are dimmer switches. How much, how little, plenty to argue about, eats up lots of time, and lots of your money paying defense lawyers, which leads you to settlement, the goal of the people suing from the beginning, and a better than 95% likelihood, unless you're prepared. Let's take a moment and congratulate ourselves. In just a few minutes, we've identified the 20 possible lawsuits, and of them, the 4 big threats that count. You just saved yourself days of research and worry. Now I want to tell you about a real lawsuit in the real world, a famous conflict of interest lawsuit. And although this lawsuit would never, ever apply to you, it's instructive for the defense the 401k fiduciary tried to play. Because if you're thinking you could rely on a similar defense that's already been played and not worked, you might want to rethink that strategy. A famous company with 30,000 employees noticed how much money they were depositing into their 401k. Somebody figured out how much money the mutual funds were making in investment management fees, and then got the bright idea of, why don't we buy our own mutual fund company and make that investment fee money ourselves? So they did, and of course eventually got sued for conflicts of interest. About those conflicts, fiduciaries are responsible for and supposed to have the freedom to pick the investment menu for the plan, right? But it's pretty obvious that an employee who serves as the 401k fiduciary of this large company is not going to choose investments outside their captive mutual funds. You think he'd keep his job if he did? No. And if that isn't a conflict of interest, I don't know what is. What gets interesting here is the defense the company put forth. They showed their fees were not out of line. The fund's performance was okay too. So we didn't do anything wrong. Nobody was hurt. What's your beef? The judge's response was basically, oh, stop. I'm not having any of that. This is a blatant conflict of interest. Your excuses that no one was hurt might be relevant if that was the accusation, but it isn't. The issue is the conflict of interest itself. You simply violated that requirement, and you're guilty. So if somewhere in the back of your mind you're figuring that the funds are great, you're okay, my filings are great, I'm okay, that's irrelevant if they aren't the grounds for the lawsuit. In addition to that, if your plan is to say, I followed orders, that's not safe. The fiduciary is in charge and named individually and personally as a defendant. That's a recipe for a scapegoat, even though he's doing what the company wants. Okay, so we have the big 4 issues and need to drill down to get more specific on the accusations and the defenses that address them and work. And by luck, we have some help. The Department of Labor has a division called EBSA, the Employee Benefit Security Administration. Those are the wonderful people that sue you. EBSA was audited recently, and it revealed a number of things, one of which is that the rise in Department of Labor lawsuits in the last 10 years has primarily been driven by violations of Regulation 408b2, which is a topic I'm going to address in depth on some other videos because it's crucial to your defense given this revelation. But before we go into those weeds, we have another basic knowledge issue which most fiduciaries are not well informed about, and that is, who is the real defendant? Coming up, how to spell fiduciary and what it means. It's not what you think it is. See you then.